I'm Sheila Fain, CEO of LaMarsh Global.
And I'm Chantal Milloy, co-founder of Levvel. Sheila, when we chatted last time, we came onto the subject of leadership and wanted to focus this session solely on leadership and the role of leader in change, because we know how important that is, and it's one of the most important elements of change. And when we work with organizations similar to you, I know in our work together, one of the very first things we do with a group of senior leaders is really start to break down information about that change from their perspective. So why? First question, why? Why are we doing this change? What results are you trying to get, which we spoke about on our last session as well? And what in that is your decision-making structure, or known as governance, in some circles, but governance or decision-making structure, what is it and how will it operate within this change? And that is something that often has not been thought about. It has been in projects that are more formal, technology projects. There tends to be some sort of a committee that's been struck up, some sort of an executive body that does meet to make decisions. But not often is the managing change piece and the risk that the people side of change drums up lands there. And the roles not well defined sometimes in those forums for who is going to watch the people side of change. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an important start to the conversation on managing change.
Right, I agree, and really want to underline the point that you made about the risk that the people side introduces to achieving the outcomes. I rarely walk into an organization that has a process to make sure that we're not only sharing with the leaders or reporting up to the leaders about how we're doing to get the solution in place on time, on budget, but also is bringing to the table risks on the people side. Where do we have parts of the organization that are struggling more than others? Where do we have leader support that's not where it needs to be versus, where we are in good shape? And I think we do our leadership, particularly our project leadership, a disservice by not bringing them that well-rounded assessment of where we are along the way. And it leads to failure of many change initiatives. Just because the solution's ready to go doesn't mean that people are ready to accept it and use it and work in a different way. So you've got to give leaders what they need, the information they need to lead their people in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. And so when we think about the role of the leader and helping them define that, it's interesting how it can feel overwhelming at times to be a leader in that role of a change that you're asked to manage, especially if you yourself don't feel you have all of the information you need. And a conversation we have with our clients around leadership in that way is often make sure you yourself feel good about that change, the conditions of the change, that you understand what the impact might be for yourself personally, but also for the people that you lead. And that if you're not ready to have that conversation with your people, don't have it yet, seek the information to feel better about those same questions you're going to get. And I think that's such an important thing we teach in our leadership training, right? But it's a simple thing, but it's good for all of us because we've been there personally as well, where you're overwhelmed and you're about to stand up in front of your people. And it's pretty visible and evident, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Both of us, and most leaders that I talk to can put those shoes on of I have to deliver a message that I don't agree with or I'm not thrilled with. I've certainly in my past done that very poorly sometimes, and people could see right through it. So in coaching and working with leaders, absolutely very critical to deal with their own issues with whatever the situation is first. Get their own head on straight before they have that conversation. just couldn't be more important. That reminds me that that is usually the first line item in our support plan for leaders, is taking care of those leaders. That's often left out as well, where if there's a communication plan list, or some kind of a plan for managing the change, we're usually more focused on leader, go deliver this message, go to this meeting, go do this thing, where we first need to figure out what kind of support do they need. Maybe they need help getting their own self straight about this change. Maybe they're not that comfortable doing whatever activity we're suggesting that they do, and they want to do it in a slightly different way. So putting that focus and support side for the leaders is time well spent at the front end, certainly along the way, but focusing on them a little bit more strongly than just blindly driving out our communication plan or, learning plan, whatever it is.
Yeah, no, it's true. And so, in the beginning of our chat here, we were talking about risk. And it just has me look at, the reason we do change management at all, and we want to reduce that risk, right? If we say at the core that it's about that, most change plans, though, that we see focus heavily on, like you said, the communication piece and learning. There's training, there's learning. And I think that most people see their way through associating change and managing change with those two things. Mm-hmm. But we know that there's those other two critical components of support for leaders. What's the role of the leader, and what type of support do they need in the plan to help them through that? And with that reinforcement, so yes. What behaviors are we reinforcing in the people that we lead versus, we don't want to reinforce the behaviors we don't want to see post a change. And do our actions actually lead the way for that? So are we allowing, not saying anything, just as hard, like to not say something when we see that someone's not coming on post the change is really reinforcing that, right? Mm-hmm. So there's workarounds. If it's a technical system, we've all seen how many workarounds pop up within days or weeks of other ways to do my work because it's more comfortable. Well, as a leader, are we reinforcing those behaviors, or are we pointing to the people on our team that are actually following the new way of doing things? That alone sometimes is all that it would take.
Right. This whole topic of reinforcement is fascinating. I recently was having a discussion about it, and I think sometimes it's the way that we phrase it when we're talking to others that makes it either stick with them or not stick with them. So we were talking about standard operating procedures or standard work, and the team was really focused on, we've got to revise our standard work documentation. And I look at that, I don't disagree with it, but I look at it from a little bit different angle. What do the standard work documents mean in your organization? If you're going to call it standard work, is there any monitoring of whether people follow those practices or not? Is there a recovery plan if you find that some percentage of your workforce is not following them? What do you really do with them? And it kind of stopped them in their tracks because, and I'm not necessarily proposing this, but what I posed to them was, why waste your time revising the standard work plans if the ones that exist today, few people are using or could even find if they needed to find them? And it was really interesting. Sometimes I think it's done for regulatory reasons. You have to have some of those documents to achieve certain accreditation or, regulatory requirements. But you also send a message to your organization unintentionally if you have something that you're calling standard work, but it really doesn't matter if you follow it or not. You're allowed to pick and choose about what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So, definitely falls in this topic of reinforcement and what you were saying about allowing behaviors that are not desired to continue. Mm-hmm. big bucket of work for managing change, because in the end, in order to drive different outcomes or different results in your organization, we have to change the behaviors of people, unless you're replacing them with robots or technology of some sort that makes us not need them for decision making.
Yeah.
We're not there yet. Hopefully we don't get there.
Yeah, no, exactly. And even with, so the conditions we're facing now with where remote work from home is going to inevitably be more of the reality, whether it's 50-50, 30-70, wherever businesses land once organizations fully open through, post COVID, that reinforcing behaviors still critically important, but it just might look a little bit different. And that's interesting too on leading remote teams, but many leaders have had to do that anyways on, field workers in the past, depending on the industry. That's always been a reality, but it kind of reminds us of the importance of being more visible sometimes as leaders, especially during the time when things are difficult or the day of a major change. And when I think about my former organizations that I've worked for, I always remember stories about working with groups of engineering leaders who I've worked with a lot in the past, technology leaders who, from a skill and a will perspective, will through the roof, like want to do a good job, want to lead my people. Didn't necessarily see myself in a leadership role. I'm highly technical. I'm highly skilled in that technical field. And now I'm a leader of a highly skilled technical workforce. And it just doesn't always naturally occur to some of those leaders on those simple things that you can do on the day of. And so sometimes the support for leader plan and managing change is as simple as reminding a group of leaders that on the day of a change, keep your door open, don't schedule any meetings, leave the office, walk the floor, ask 4 people how they're doing this morning and what support that you can provide them. Simple.
That can be scary though, right?
It's really scary, especially for the people on the floor. Imagine it's like, whoa, I haven't seen Bob or Sarah in weeks, and here they are. They're standing at my desk, looking over my shoulder. But those simple things with practice can become the routine for leaders, and that's certainly an experience that I had that stuck with me in my past roles and past organizations.
Yeah. One thing I really like to help people think about too is every time that we're going into another change, which happens on a daily basis anymore, change is just constant. We have this opportunity to reinvent in some way or change things that we don't like. If you really do a good assessment of what's not working in the current state, and you're as the leader that has the authority to map out what's the future going to look like, what a perfect opportunity to say, some of this stuff that's just been nagging at us and I know causes inefficiencies or whatever it is, that needs to stop. Okay, then how's it going to look in the future? Now the hard work comes in making it happen. We don't sprinkle fairy dust around and it happens by magic. However, with intention and planning, you can change those behaviors, starting with setting different expectations and really taking stock of what are you doing as a leader that enables people to continue doing things you don't want them to do. So what do I need to do differently first? And then, how am I going to help others on that journey?
Yeah.
Ultimately, there may need to be some consequences, but, I don't like to go there first.
Yes, no, it's a good thing to wait that out a little and then, but definitely to do it if required. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're onto something here. And I really think the next time that we chat, we should focus on really defining where you are today and why you're changing and the desired state. Because from a leader perspective, I think that really ties into, you've got to know what when done is done.
Mhm.
And so defining that as a group of leaders is so important before you can even begin to guide people through that change. So
Right.
maybe next time we meet, we talk a little bit about desired state and the measures and metrics, like measuring that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Awesome. All right. We'll chat soon.
Yep. Great talking to you.
You too.